You wake up every day in a world that screams at you. Notifications, arguments, opinions, noise. Everyone wants to be seen. Everyone wants to be heard. But no one wants to be understood. They mistake noise for influence. They think attention is power. They think shouting louder makes their words true. But the wise man knows. The loudest voice in the room is usually the weakest. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." He didn't say argue with others. He didn't say convince them. He said, be tolerant. Because the man who knows himself doesn't need to prove himself. You see, silence is not emptiness. Silence is discipline. It's the moment between action and reaction. It's the space where your mind sharpens, where your emotions settle, where your true thoughts emerge from the chaos. But that silence, it terrifies weak men, because when the noise stops, they're forced to face the truth. They have nothing real to say, no mission, no values, no spine, just echoes of other people's opinions. You can see it in their eyes. They talk too much, yet say nothing. They laugh too loud, yet feel empty. They post, argue, debate, all day. But they never sit with their own thoughts. Because silence demands introspection, and introspection exposes weakness. When you learn to stay silent, you begin to see what others can't. You notice patterns, you read people's intentions, you become a student of behavior. And that's when the shift happens. You start controlling situations without saying a word. A silent man unnerves the room. People sense it. They feel that stillness, that quiet confidence. It's not arrogance, it's presence. It's what warriors carried before battle. It's what philosophers carried in debate. It's what great leaders carried in chaos. Because silence is the armor of the disciplined. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But in today's world, men have reversed that ratio. They speak without thinking, listen without hearing, and react without understanding. You can't grow that way. You can't evolve that way. Because the man who constantly reacts is enslaved by his emotions, and the man who controls his emotions controls everything. The Stoics knew this truth centuries ago. They built empires in their minds before ever touching the world. They conquered themselves, and in doing so, became untouchable by chaos. So stop feeding the noise. Stop explaining yourself to those who refuse to listen. Stop chasing arguments you've already won by walking away. Your silence will echo louder than their words ever could. When a man stays silent, he doesn't shrink. He expands. He grows deeper, sharper, calmer. He moves with purpose. He speaks only when necessary. And when he does, the world stops to listen. That's power. Not in your tone, not in your words, but in your restraint. Remember this. The man who speaks every thought is a slave to his impulses. The man who controls his tongue is master of his fate. Stay silent. Observe. Move strategically. And when it's time to speak, make sure your words are as heavy as your silence. You've learned to hold your tongue. Now comes the harder part. Learning to hold your mind. Silence isn't just about shutting your mouth. It's about mastering your thoughts, because even when the world goes quiet, your mind doesn't. It whispers doubts, fears, regrets, old voices you thought you left behind. That's the battlefield now. Not the noise outside, but the storm within. Most men try to silence the world. Few try to silence themselves. But the real warriors of discipline, they go inward. They face the noise that no one else can hear. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom begins when your thoughts obey you, when your emotions serve you, when your silence becomes your sanctuary, not your prison. You start to see things differently. You realize how addicted people are to distraction. They can't sit still for 5 minutes without reaching for a screen. They need stimulation, like oxygen. They've forgotten what it means to be alone with their own soul. But you're different. You've chosen the harder path. You've chosen silence. Not because it's easy, but because it's powerful. Silence trains you to observe before you act, to understand before you speak, to see before you're seen. It turns chaos into information. It turns emotion into clarity. It turns hesitation into strategy. When you stay silent long enough, you begin to hear the truth underneath the noise. You notice who's pretending, who's insecure, who's overcompensating. You learn the difference between people who speak to be heard and people who speak to bring value. That's perception, the kind that no book or lecture can teach you. You only gain it in stillness. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are disturbed by external things, it is not by the things themselves, but by your judgment about them." That's what silence gives you, the distance between event and reaction. You stop taking things personally. You stop reacting to every insult, every challenge, every test. You begin to choose your response, and that's when your power becomes undeniable. Because a man who can choose his response cannot be controlled. The world thrives on reaction. They want you impulsive, emotional, predictable. They want you loud so they can study you. But when you're silent, you become unreadable, untouchable. You move like a shadow through their chaos. That's how silence builds power. You stop being a piece on the board and become the one moving them. You no longer waste words proving yourself. You no longer chase validation. You let your actions speak, and your silence follow. That's when people begin to wonder what you're thinking. That's when they start to respect you, or fear you. Both are useful, because silence is not passive. It's strategic. It's the mark of a man who's measured, deliberate, composed. The kind of man who can walk through fire without flinching, because he's already fought worse battles in his own mind. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free, and the bravest thing you can do today is to be still in a world that can't stop moving, to listen in a world that only shouts, to stand calm while everyone else loses themselves to noise." That's how you separate yourself, not through attention, but through restraint, not by shouting louder, but by standing taller in silence. Let the world keep screaming. Let them drown in their own noise. While you sharpen your mind in the quiet. You train your patience. You master your emotions. Because silence is not retreat. It's preparation. When you rise again, you'll move with precision. You'll speak with weight. You'll act with purpose. And every word, every glance, every silence will carry power. Stay silent. Not because you have nothing to say, but because your silence says more than words ever could. There comes a point when silence stops being a practice and becomes who you are. At first, it feels like restraint. Then, it becomes composure. And finally, it turns into power. You no longer seek the last word. You no longer chase understanding. You simply know. And that knowing speaks louder than noise ever could. See, the world doesn't need more men who talk. It needs more men who listen. Men who can observe without reacting, wait without losing patience, and speak only when the weight of their silence demands it. That's where wisdom lives, in the pause between thought and action. But most people will never find it, because silence is uncomfortable. It exposes everything you've been avoiding. It shows you your weaknesses, your insecurities, your fears. That's why they keep the music loud, the screens bright, the conversations shallow. Because if they stop, even for a moment, They'll hear the truth whispering back. And the truth is this: most men are prisoners of noise. They build their confidence on opinions, their worth on validation, their peace on distraction. But you've stepped away from that prison. You've chosen solitude over attention, reflection over reaction, purpose over popularity, and that choice changes everything. You start to carry yourself differently. You walk slower, speak less, but when you do, your words cut through the room, because people feel it, that energy, that calm, grounded presence that doesn't beg to be seen. It commands to be noticed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That's the essence of silence. Stop arguing, stop proving, stop performing. Be. Be disciplined, be steady, be unshakable. Because a silent man isn't just quiet, he's in control of himself. He knows that his emotions are not his master, that his time is not for everyone, that his energy is sacred. You don't throw your words to the wind anymore. You don't explain your every move. You act, and let the silence after your actions speak for you. That's why silence frightens people. It reminds them of what they lack: control. They can't understand a man who doesn't seek attention, because attention is their only currency. But your currency is peace, and peace can't be bought. It's earned, moment by moment, thought by thought, in the quiet discipline of a man who refuses to be moved by noise. Now listen carefully. Silence is not about disappearing. It's about returning, stronger, sharper, colder. It's about learning to act from stillness, to move without panic, to speak without ego. When you master silence, you become dangerous, not because you threaten, but because you don't need to. The man who can sit in stillness and wait is the man the world cannot predict. He doesn't chase moments. He creates them. He doesn't seek control. He is control. Because silence is clarity, and clarity is power. So let them talk. Let them fill the air with words that mean nothing. You, stay silent. Stay calm. Stay grounded. Because when the noise fades, and the crowd grows tired, and the world runs out of things to say, the man who stayed silent will still be standing. And when he finally speaks, his voice will echo through generations. Stay silent, stay disciplined, stay unshakable. The world is loud, but a man who masters silence commands it.